Welcome to Wokelandia, the podcast, where we are exposing the injustice in social justice. We are your hosts, the Backholm Brothers. One of us is speaking. I'm Caleb. The other one is singing.
It's Joseph. This is the show that is too cheap to have its own bumper music. Are we too cheap, or do we just not know what we're doing technologically, Caleb?
Well,
are we too old?
It's a 50-50.
Be able to navigate
over 40.
The challenges.
Yep.
Bumper music on a podcast.
And we got to figure out the bumper music, but it's so good you singing. I don't know that we can top that.
Yeah, I think we should just keep it. We should keep it.
It probably will forever.
So here on Wokelandia, we cover wokeness as we encounter it every day. And Caleb,
and we encounter it every day.
Oh, we do encounter it every day. It's the gift that keeps on giving. It's an endless supply of illustrations and examples, and especially, perhaps even especially during election season, which we find ourselves in right now. And Caleb, President Biden just gave us an example of wokeness and social justice, and with a little bit of critical theory thrown in. And if there's any difference between those things, I'm not sure, but whatever term we're using to describe this, tell us what happened. What is he outraged about these days?
So yesterday, and that's why we can't ever do a lot of prep in advance, because the stuff just comes up and we think, let's talk about this. Yesterday, Joe Biden talks about airline tickets and the seats in particular. And it is and has been a little bit of an aggravation for people when, I just flew on a flight and the carry-ons are free, but the personal items are not on this particular airline. And it's a low, no frills, low cost airline. The no cost everybody likes, of course, or the low cost.
Didn't Kenneth Copeland refer to those as a tube full of demons at one point? Is that your airline?
Which is why he doesn't fly those, because nobody wants a tube full of demons. I, on the other hand, filled with the spirit, am comfortable with a tube full of demons. So I just went right on there with my carry-on, which was actually a personal item. But the lady stopped me and said, "Hey, wait a minute. That might be too big. You got to go put it in that little container over there, the measuring thing. If you know what I'm talking about, put it in there and see if it fits." Well, it barely fit, but it did fit. So I got in for free. Another guy right behind me, his didn't fit, and he was complaining about it, but he had to pay, I don't know, $60 or something to get it on there, which is a little bit aggravating.
They charge for it too.
So Joe Biden decides this is a federal issue along with the seats, and is going to try to stop them from charging it. But the thing is, you could go on an airline that doesn't charge that, and sometimes we do that. But
and again, why do they charge for that? Because these are discount airlines. They charge a really low amount for the seat. Then they try to make up for it by charging with your baggage. However, I mean, of course, the way to get around this is just to wear 7 layers.
Yeah, just put all your
get on the airplane.
Don't have a suitcase.
You're really hot.
Walk on like that kid from the Christmas story.
Kind of waddle on like that kid in the Christmas story.
Boom,
right? I mean, it's uncomfortable, but it's less expensive because they can't make you take your clothes off. Going through security at TSA is also a little challenging. They look at you funny, but you're like, "Hey, bro, I'm on Spirit today. Of course, I'm saving money." So yes, it's an aggravation to be sure. But the reason you bought the
airlines paying a little bit more, and then you don't have to worry about it. And so, and then sometimes if you don't have anything to take with you, it's kind of nice to pay less. And so, the consumers choose. It's a little bit aggravating if you can't get
for those who travel with no baggage. Does anyone do that?
I do. When I go to Denver on that hiking trip.
Oh, you packed nothing.
No, not nothing. I had underwear to change, and I had, the necessaries. I had 2 t-shirts. I was just there we were just there with guys. Okay. So I don't have to dress up. I got one little carry-on, and I got very little in the way of extra.
You probably don't want to talk this publicly about your personal hygiene.
Oh, I took showers every day. So
I was good. When it's that struggling.
I was good to go. So
but keep going.
Occasionally you can do it. You can go with just the little carry-on, or just the personal item, not the carry-on, whatever. Just a small bag. So anyway, now Joe Biden decides he's going to tackle this because people are annoyed by it a little bit, and he's going to try to fix the problem. And also the seats are close together in some cases. So this is the comment. What's that?
All cases, they're very close together. Yes.
Well, unless you get an emergency row, that one's actually kind of nice, but that doesn't happen very often. But you can. So we're going to play this clip where he's trying to talk about how he's going to use the government, some kind of law, and make it so. I don't know exactly what he doesn't actually make a solid proposal. He's just trying to let people know that he hears that they don't like the airline thing. And so let's play this clip real quick here from Biden, and then we'll talk about the way he tries to get wokeism in to show how important his deal is. So here's my my tech savvy skills. We're going to play the video here right now. If I can get this to pop up. And I think we're there. Let's see if we go ahead and listen to the video.
Decision. Some airlines, if you want 6 more inches between you and the seat in front, you pay more money. But you don't know it until you purchase your ticket. Look, folks, these are junk fees. They're unfair, and they hit marginalized Americans the hardest, especially low-income folks and people of color.
Okay, so there you go. People of color, in particular, are having troubles with this.
Do we know what color is particularly annoyed by these?
Which one?
No, which color? It's just people of which color is particularly annoyed. It's just white people love having to pay more for more leg room, and
the people of non-color are not worried. They're like the translucent ghosts, apparently, because they have no color.
People of no color.
They don't care. They could just hover there.
Well, that is actually probably true. When you are living in the spirit realm, you can fly on the tube full of demons for no charge.
You're colorless. It doesn't matter. But the people who have some color to them, this is aggravating because they have to sit down on the seat. And so it's like, wait a minute, I have color, plus I have knees, and my knees, it's too close. And obviously what he means, he doesn't mean people of color, any color. He means people who have enhanced melanin, who are darker.
Right. Yes, of course.
And they are oppressed.
But explain to me, Caleb, why would people of color be more bothered to pay for legroom than people who are not of color? Because I am genuinely perplexed by that. I understand the gripe, for sure. I mean, I've been annoyed by being charged for bags before, and in being charged for legroom. It's like, I'm in a middle seat. I'd like to not be in a middle seat. Oh, they want to charge me $60 to get me out of a middle seat. No. So you're kind of irritated because that middle seat, that non-middle seat is going to sit there empty, right? So I'm totally sympathetic to the scenario. Why is the president involved? Okay, we can talk about that. But why is this more troublesome to people who are not white?
Well, it's not, as it turns out. It actually doesn't make any difference. I mean, I could try to make up some funny story about how it's so much harder if you have more melanin to sit in a seat than it is for people of lesser melanin to sit in that same seat, unless like maybe
I would say like
maybe they're all NBA players. Maybe he thinks black people are all NBA players.
And I was actually just going to go there because like Samoan people, right, on average, much bigger than we Swede Finns.
Yeah, but they don't need the knee room. They're not taller necessarily. They're just thicker.
I think both, right? But whatever. I mean, there are ethnicities that are on average larger. Is that what he's referring to?
Maybe he thinks all black people play in the NBA, and they indeed would need
they would need more leg room
because that would be annoying if you were 6'10".
I mean, I was actually on a flight this week, and I noticed a dude like 2 seats in front of me, and his head. And this was one of these, like, it was more like a regional flight. I was flying out of Rapid City, South Dakota, right? So there are small planes flying in and out of there, and his head was touching he had to like be slouched over because just sitting in his seat, his head was touching the luggage bin above him, and I felt so bad for him.
And was he of color?
He was, but he just happened to be tall.
There you go. There you go, because
an illustration of that. But of course, there are tall white people as well who would be similarly uncomfortable.
They would be just fine with it.
But let's land this plane. Why do you think he would bring this up?
Good metaphor.
Yes, let's that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Why would he even bother to mention this? Why don't you just come out and say, hey, I dislike baggage fees. I dislike extra fees that airlines charge to have, to give you more leg room. And so I want to stop them. Now, I don't think the president should be able to do that. I think if you want to charge $900 for a particular seat and somebody wants to pay for it, then fine. If it sits empty, then fine. The airline should be able to do that. But why would this turn into a racial issue?
Yeah, and it's an effort to move everything to Wokelandia, to social justice, to showing we have our oppressed and our oppressors. And if you can find a group of oppressed people, then this jumps to the top of the priority for our society.
And is it that simple? Because it's really weird because, right, we are right now less than 2 weeks before the midterm elections, and everything, a lot has been put into these elections. It's weird that with inflation, there's these gas prices, the president is right now draining the strategic oil reserves, kind of our emergency supply, to try to like artificially keep the gas prices reduced, just leading up to the elections, right? We have a border crisis. There's a lot of things that are really problematic. It's weird then that the president comes out and starts talking about airline fees. Is this, cynically, is this just, oh, everybody's going to hate these, they're going to agree with me? Do you think that's what's happening here? Why is he talking about this? Because if you were to do a public opinion poll and say, what issues are most important to you as you vote this November, and people are asking those questions, where does fees for additional leg room on an airplane fit on that list?
Well, it's really low on the list, but the problem is everything that's high on the list is harmful for him at the polls. So he's got to find something somewhere on that list where he's got at least 50% of the people, or hopefully 50% of the people that agree with him. And a lot of people probably don't like there's not a lot of leg room on the planes, and they don't like paying the fees. And so it's like, hey, that's something that can unite us around me. And I don't know that it's going to drive any votes at all. But then it's like, well, that's not very important planes, but it is very important if you can pull it into Wokelandia. And now the marginalized are being harmed by this. And especially people of color, like he says, are being harmed by it. Now, he doesn't actually tie that in because
there's no support for that. Is there any evidence? Right. Yeah. And that's, I think, the point, that the Wokelandia component of this is he's trying to elevate the importance of an issue that in context is relatively unimportant by saying, as soon as you say the marginalized and people of color are more impacted, then it becomes a social justice issue. And then we know that we are obligated to give it great import. Now, he doesn't support it. He doesn't say, here's how. Because again, we started off this conversation, how in the world does this impact people of color more than people who are not of color? Right? It's like the airlines are the airlines, and we all kind of have the same experience when we're on an airplane, right? So that assertion seems silly, but once you make it a social justice issue, you're not allowed to ask questions about it because that makes you a bad person, right? Is that fundamentally what we're dealing with?
Yeah, you just if you can tie that in, and you don't even have to logically or genuinely tie it in, but once you show that there's a tie-in, then that is the knee-jerk reaction. It's like, oh, this is a social justice issue, therefore this is right and righteous, and we must all get behind this. And it can turn any issue, and this is literally an example of the ability to turn any minor thing into a huge issue, as long as you can tie it in with showing a marginalized.
As long as you can make it a racial issue. And we've seen this recently. I'll get another example of this: hurricane relief, right? Where Kamala Harris came out and made her statements about the fact that hurricane relief should keep principles of equity in mind, because communities of color are more affected and poor people are more affected. And again, I think it's probably true that poor people are more affected by a natural disaster than people who are wealthy and have tremendous means.
That has nothing to do with the race.
That has nothing. Yeah. If your house is destroyed, your house is destroyed. And finances matter. The color of your skin doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're Korean or Hispanic or, Norwegian. Right. You all are similarly inconvenienced by the fact that your house got destroyed by a hurricane.
Right. And if you're light skinned and your house gets destroyed, it's just as bad as being dark skinned and your house being destroyed. And that's what she should have said, is because she said, we're going to help dark-skinned people before light-skinned people, essentially.
Well, she didn't say that,
Essentially,
but that's the implication of equity.
She didn't use that wording of it, but we need to take into account their skin color. And if you're taking into account their skin color, there's no other way around it than to treat people differently based on their skin color. And that's racism. You treat people differently based on their skin color. And here, I'm not sure that they're going to charge white people more than black people for the airline seats. He didn't say that. And there'd be so much pushback that almost certainly wouldn't happen, you would think. But what exactly is he getting at there? I mean, what other solution could be somehow benefiting or harming one racial group over another? That seems like the only way around it. He's not going to do that. None of this is going to happen. This is just a ploy.
I think this is a press conference that will soon go away.
Positive publicity. It is. But the topic, of course, and the approach will probably never go away for the left.
Right. And that, right. And which is the point for our discussion here today, is realizing that as soon as you can racialize something, then you're not allowed to be critical of their approach. You're not allowed to be critical of their response. You're not allowed to question whether this is really the right thing to do, because as soon as it's been racialized, then you're just supposed to agree and cooperate with whatever he wants to do. And so if he wants to like create, price controls for airline seat upgrades, right? If he wants to do that, in most contexts, we would all say no. But as soon as it's a social justice issue, then but of course we should have rent controls for air. I mean, it's a very micro rent control.
Some issues matter, others matter less. But once you bring in social justice, that issue really matters, no matter what it is. And we'll see that repeated as we go with our podcast, and just go with
all day, every day. There's an endless supply of this nonsense.
Well, I think that perfectly illustrates the point of our podcast, where we show the injustice in social justice, unjustly elevating this to a way more important priority than it actually is, by pulling in social justice into the topic. Yeah. So I think we've demonstrated that here today. Any other closing comments on this?
No, though I would be happy to not have to pay more. Especially the luggage thing is a much bigger issue for me. Although I will say, you and I travel much more than you do.
Yeah.
So this is actually, for better or worse, a problem I'm not dealing with in my own life, but I have dealt with it in the past.
Pay the bag or what?
Yeah, I don't really pay for much on airlines anymore.
Your frequent flyer stuff?
Yeah. I mean, it's I spend so much time on airplanes that they give me lots of things. And so I can take much more luggage than I ever would dream of taking, and I could do it for free.
And we can talk about the idea that if you make the seats further apart, there will be fewer seats, and therefore they'll have to charge more for those seats.
Right. I mean, and again, the luggage thing is more troublesome to me.
The federal government can't get around physics. And so it's just the fact that
it's a long list of things that's just kind of none of your business as far as the government is concerned. We as consumers can complain about it. We can object. The market can react. Airlines are responsive when their customers don't like something. If another airline takes those things away, we can go to that airline and do it, right? I mean, this is just none of the government's business fundamentally, which is why I'm very confident nothing is going to come of this.
It's a problem they can't solve, really.
Yeah, and understanding the politics behind this. Why did the president do this? Because he's trying to make an issue that he agrees with. Why can he elevate this issue? You can elevate any issue, like, trash on the side of the road. As soon as you say the trash on the side of the road, which we all dislike, right? But who gives much thought to the trash on the side of the road? It's not a huge political issue. Declare it to be a social justice issue somehow. I don't know how you make the connection, but he didn't try to make the connection either. You just say that it is, and suddenly, oh my goodness, yeah, we've got to care about that thing.
Elevated issue.
And that's how easily manipulated we are. And of course, justice matters, and so we have to care about those things. But we have to also be thinking critically about, is this a justice issue, or are we just being manipulated by people who want to manipulate us? And the rules of Wokelandia make manipulation very, very easy.
Very well said. And thanks for joining us on this episode of the Wokelandia podcast. We will be back, I don't know, pretty soon with another example, another episode, and more analysis of what's going on in our culture. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I'm Caleb.
I'm Joseph. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.